It's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials, as well as give a lot of baking business advice. So today we're going to be talking all about American buttercream. Now if you just want the quick recipe, you can go ahead and check that right down below in the description box. But I'm going to be going through everything that I want to say about American buttercream. Now the reason that I'm making this video is because I, long time ago, had made a video comparing Italian meringue buttercream and American buttercream. And while I do think there are some things that I said in that video that still have its merits, I definitely didn't do the American buttercream justice enough. And it's really strange because I've made American buttercream prior to that video, not once, not twice, but about 50 times prior to making that video. And I even think 50 is a little bit low of an estimate. So in the video, I really don't like it because it turns out way grainier. It doesn't have that nice light and fluffy look that American buttercream can definitely have. So every time I see that video pop up, I'm kind of like, ooh, no, I need to redo that. So finally, I'm getting down to that and redoing that. I'm going to share with you guys all of my tips about American buttercream, as well as show you my own personal recipe. And I use the word recipe very lightly because there's only so many ways to spin American buttercream. So let's get into it. So the first thing is I'm just going to go right in and we're going to talk about the recipe that I redid right here. So what you want to start with is you want to generally start with butter. You can use shortening or a mixture of butter and shortening. I personally like to use butter. I don't have super high temperatures here, so I prefer the flavor of an all butter American buttercream. And the amount of butter that I usually start with is 454 grams. Now, if you guys have been watching my channel for a while, you know that I don't do very large cakes, especially when I'm making real cakes. So this is mainly to cover a 4-inch or a 6-inch. If I wanted to cover an 8-inch, I would obviously double my ingredients. Also, if I'm making a rosette cake, I would also double my ingredients because it takes a lot more buttercream than you think to make one of those rosette cakes. So taking that butter, the first thing is, and I think I might have missed this step in the first video, I'm not sure, I can't remember, but the first thing is you definitely want to make sure that this is at room temperature. Because when it's not at room temperature, you tend to have to beat that butter a little bit more so that it gets pliable and it's easier to work with. However, beating that butter adds in too many air bubbles. And if you have too many air bubbles, you're going to develop air bubbles in your frosting as well. So it's best to start with room temperature butter. And if you want to get room temperature butter fairly quickly, what you can do is you can put your butter in your KitchenAid or your mixing bowl and place it over a double boiler just for a minute or so until it gets softened up, and then you kind of whip it very gently. I wouldn't go more than a 1 or a 2 on your KitchenAid. The next thing that you're going to do is after that butter is kind of amalgamated together and it's no longer just a lump, you want to add in your icing sugar. And the icing sugar that I always use is this icing sugar. I find it does not clump on me whatsoever, and I find that I don't really have to sift it. Now, if you're very worried about potential lumps, you can definitely sift it, but for someone like me who always likes to take the easier route if I can, I don't sift and I don't find that I have that many issues. And I add in about 3/4 of the bag, I would say, for 454 grams of butter. But don't worry, I will give you the exact measurement here so that there is no guessing. I also add in my water or liquid at this point. I say water or liquid because you can use things like espresso, or you can use old pots of coffee or some tea that's left over, depending on how you want to flavor your buttercream. Now, more than likely, you're probably going to use water, or you can use milk. I find I get best results when I use water. And I know that sounds weird, but I find that the whipping cream or the milk just kind of changes the way it works, and I personally like the way it works with water. I also find too that because it's made with water rather than with milk, it increases the shelf life just a little bit. The next thing that you're going to do here is you're just going to mix it. Now this is where most of us go wrong. And by most of us, I'm really talking about me because I went very wrong the first time I showed you guys how to make this. When you do it, don't mix it above a 3 or a 4, especially if you're using the amounts that I'm telling you to use in this recipe. If you've doubled the recipe or if you've tripled the recipe and you actually have the frosting going above the paddle of your KitchenAid mixer, then it's totally fine to turn that up just a little bit. But realistically, if you're covering a 4 or 6 inch, like I mentioned, with buttercream and you want to make it nice and smooth, you're going to have less than what the paddle is. So you want to mix it slowly. And I mix this on about a 1 or a 2. It's better to mix it longer and slower than quicker, but then you end up with a bunch of air bubbles. Now, if you're noticing that your buttercream is a little bit yellowish, this can happen depending on the type of butter that you use. Don't fret. And I fretted for way too long before I learned this trick. Add a tiny, tiny little drop of purple gel food coloring, just a smidge, and do a little dot at a time. I kind of like to have my bottle there. I squeeze it just a little bit so a little bit is showing, and then I dab it on, and that's about it. And you keep doing that until all of the yellow is gone and you're left with just a nice white buttercream. Now, everybody's humidity and weather is different, which means that your frostings are going to react differently. Now, if you notice that it's still a little bit too loose, add a little bit of icing sugar. If that still doesn't do the trick and it seems really, really grainy, you probably need to add a little bit more fat. So either add in that shortening that you're using in your buttercream if you're using that, or in my case, I would add in a little bit of butter, just a couple tablespoons at first, and mixing slowly. What you want to end up with is you want to end up with a nice and fluffy frosting. And as you can see, this frosting is really great to use. It's awesome for a beginner. It's very, very stable. It's nice and thick, so you're not going to end up with kind of gaps and holes with your stuff, especially if you're really piling it on and then scraping it off. It's going to do really, really well for covering cakes smoothly with buttercream. Now, some of the things that I said in that last video that I still agree with is that when it comes to doing things like fancier flowers like roses or a ranunculus or different things that you're trying to showcase, especially in those really beautiful elaborate cakes, I find I still need to play around with the buttercream a little bit. But one thing that I did say before was that you would have to add a bunch of things, I think, to make rosettes, is what I said. I can't quite recall, but I do feel like I've said that in a video or two. And the truth is, if you mix up your buttercream properly, using my recipe that I have now updated on here, you're gonna have no problem making rosettes. Like in this video here, where I did use American buttercream, it's the same texture of buttercream that I use to actually cover a cake, and it's the same thing that I use to pipe these rosettes and all of these different other accoutrements on the cake. Now, in terms of flavor, American buttercream versus any other type of buttercream or ganache covering, that is really a preference thing. I personally sometimes like American buttercream, but sometimes I do prefer the silkiness of that Italian meringue or Swiss meringue buttercream. Meringue-based buttercreams are going to be, by nature, smoother. It's going to be a smoother mouth feel. There is just an innate grainy texture to American buttercream. Now, I say grainy texture, that doesn't mean it's gonna feel like a pile of sand in your mouth. It just has a little bit more of a grain to it, but it's not super obvious, especially if you're not super discerning with your palate, i.e. children at a children's birthday party probably won't be so discerning about, ooh, you used Italian meringue buttercream versus you used American buttercream. So all in all, American buttercream definitely has its place, and I've been using it more and more, especially because during the summertime, I find it holds up better, and it is a lot quicker to make. I think I said in my previous video that it took a long time to make, but that's just because I kept messing it up in that video for some reason. So it's very, very quick, it comes together nicely, and it's really, really easy to re-whip. It also has a great shelf life. I can leave my American buttercream out for a week and have no issues, no weird smell, nothing at all. It also refrigerates very well too. But just like American buttercream, Italian meringue buttercream can be stored in the fridge or freezer and last for a lot longer. I feel so good now that I have finally redone my American buttercream video. Thank you so much, by the way, to all of you that have been tagging me on your different cakes and different things that you make on Instagram. It is so wonderful to see you guys using some of the videos and ideas that I put out here and making it your own. I absolutely love that. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!